Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Vishnu Padaya Krishna prastaya bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastyachari Satavine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Pastyachari Satavine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Yadvaita Radha Srivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Bolo Hare Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Bolo Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Bolo, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Gauritai ki jai. Shri Krishna Balaram ki jai. Shri Radha Govinda Madhava ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Haribo. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna Vidaya Krishna Prastaya Bhaktivedanta Swami Srinamani Namaste Sangotavani Vishnu Sisters anybody Prastacharya. Okay. Who's the host? Rasika? Who's hosting us? Rasika, you're hosting?
Yes, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj,
Okay.
thank you so much for being so kind to bless us with your association tonight. Tonight is a very special night because tonight we are having for the first time in our association His Holiness Janananda Goswami Maharaj ki. So to introduce Maharaj, I would request Ramai Das Prabhu to please unmute and introduce Maharaj. Ramai Prabhu, you can unmute.
You know how to unmute, Ramai Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
That little red button.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, all the devotees in Mauritius and Krishna Prabhu, Ajay Chaitanya Prabhu, thank you for inviting Maharaj to give on this auspicious occasion to give a talk on Srila Prabhupada's 125th. So just quickly, I just like to, it's a great privilege and honor for me just today to give me the privilege and occasion to present Maharaj. So His Holiness Janananda Goswami Maharaj, he joined ISKCON in London and he was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1972. Maharaj has served in various countries around the world, but in the last few years, he has readily dedicated himself to supporting the France Yatra. For most of the lockdown, Maharaj has been serving at ISKCON New Mayapur, France, engaged in variety of practical services in providing much support to the devotees in trying to maintain the project. As you must know, Srila Prabhupada stayed in New Mayapur 3 times, and he personally installed the Sri Krishna Balaram deities over there in France, in New Mayapur. Outside Europe is the first. So that's a very, very special temple. And this temple was an old French castle, and it only remained, it's remaining ISKCON property in Europe where Srila Prabhupada stayed. And Maharaj is serving that, he took to his heart to serve those devotees over there. His Holiness Janananda Maharaj is an exceptional practitioner and exponent of Kirtan, Harinam, and book distribution in the line of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Maharaj's quick wit, humility, and loving personal nature is very uplifting and inspires us all to take shelter of the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna. And also Maharaj is an initiating guru. He's got disciples all over the world, particularly in Malaysia, in Australia, in New Zealand, you name it, in Philippines, in the East European countries, in Slovenia, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia, Holland, France, and not to forget in the UK, and even I think in Mauritius, some of devotees are living in Australia, and myself, and yes, so this is a bit of Maharaj. And Maharaj also, he's a special soul, because as he's preaching, he's practicing, he's one of the person, if you meet him personally, you will be attracted forever, and you won't want to leave him alone. Because wherever he goes in Sankirtan, it is like the piper, everybody follows him.
Okay.
So this is Maharaj. And he got devotees also in India, everywhere. And so that's for today, and not taking too much of the time. So let's hear Maharaj himself. Hare Krishna.
Okay, you said everything. Any questions?
Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Now we'll give the real person now. That's the what to do. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ramai Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Whatever we have, we obviously we No, it's by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Anything useful we have is by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So today you say it's a very auspicious day. I'm not quite sure what else you're referring to, but here in France, because of course France and Mauritius have a little relationship with each other. You also, many of you speak French. So there's a relationship there. I mean, France did have its foothold in Mauritius at one point of time. Huh? And many Mauritius people live here in France. We have some online right now in Paris from Mauritius, I think. We have quite a few devotees from the States, America online, because this is a good time for them. Some disciples from America. For Australia, New Zealand, it's not a good time. It's the middle of their night. But there's one or two there. Anyway, thank you all for being with us this, whatever it is, morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it is, with us today. And today we've been asked to speak on a chapter from the Prabhupada lilamrta. And there are many, and of course those who are in Mauritius, all of you will have this, already got this book, I'm sure, of Giriraj Maharaj. I will build you a temple. Beautiful story of the Juhu story. And it's interesting because tonight's subject matter, majority, you could say, is focused around Prabhupada's first visit to Mumbai, Bombay as it was called then, with his disciples. We all know that Prabhupada, probably we do anyway, basically speaking, his preaching in the West springboarded from Bombay when he received that ticket from Samadhi Maharaji, etc., in Bombay, and he took his train from Bombay to Calcutta to catch the boat. And Bombay he considered to be, the most important city in India, basically speaking, at least for Krishna conscious preaching. So tonight we're going to be hearing a little bit about Srila Prabhupada's India preaching mission. He left India in 65, went back again in 67, but that was I can't say a brief visit, but it was a visit partially due to his health and not so much for establishing Krishna consciousness, a little bit, but not too much. Mainly because of his health, he took that return to India, then returned quickly to America. But in 1970, Prabhupada again returned to India. Now, so what's auspicious about today? Well, that's auspicious. It's auspicious you're all here with us tonight, at least for me, it's auspicious. It's also auspicious because here today in New Mayapur, once in a century event took place. It only takes place once in a century. The last time it took place here was in 1905. So it's 116 years ago, that the world famous Tour de France bicycle race just past New Mayapur today. Within about 2 kilometers of here, all the, whatever they are, cyclists were racing past on their bicycles. So we had about 30 devotees in different spots chanting Hare Krishna as they passed by. Or at the end, when they finished the day's racing, many thousands and thousands of people are gathered to hear the holy name. And this is the most auspicious thing, you could say, is that somehow or another, people get the chance to hear the holy name. And it's one of the interesting features of, we could say, of this chapter, is the emphasis that Prabhupada placed upon chanting the holy name of Krishna, which we'll come to in a minute. The chapter is titled, and if you have your book, I don't know if you have anything on screen, but if you have your book, dancing is called India, Dancing White Elephants, and it starts off on August 29th, 1970. So we're going back quite a few years, almost 51 years ago. Prabhupada arrived again in India, in Calcutta this time, having been in Tokyo. Tokyo, at that time, Prabhupada was very much, he wanted to establish. In fact, he almost went to Tokyo on his first preaching venture outside of India. Didn't happen. But he went back to Tokyo again to establish a preaching center in Tokyo, helped to establish the center there, but primarily to arrange for his printing of his books with the famous printing company Dai Nippon. And there he negotiated very expertly to get Krishna book and Back to Godhead magazines, Isha Upanishad, and different literatures. And in fact, a Back to Godhead magazine in Hindi also, printed there by Dai Nippon, very good prices, with very little down payment. But his intention was to send a large shipment of books to India. Prabhupada had already conceived as a plan how to establish Krishna consciousness back in India. Now, I'm just going to read something to you. If you can bear with me a second as I locate it. Yeah. I remember a long time ago when I was in, I don't know, in Malaysia, I guess. We were preaching there for a long time, and not Mauritius, Malaysia. And Prabhu Vishnu Prabhu, some of you know him, he was a sannyasi at the time, was also there. He was like our GBC regional secretary, like that. And we joined more or less together in England. He's a little bit before me. And we were traveling together quite a lot of time on Sankirtan and different things. And then he went to India in 75, and he ended up opening in 77. He went to Nepal to establish a temple in Nepal. Bangladesh, he was also going. Pioneer. He was also a pioneer preacher. And Prabhupada told me that Prabhupada told him, although it seems to be a common understanding amongst many devotees, that he told me that Srila Prabhupada told him that although Prabhupada's guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's mission was predominantly to preach in the West, which Prabhupada did. He did everything he could to fulfill that, a desire of his Guru Maharaj. But Prabhupada said, my mission is to preach in India. Yeah, special. We see that the Prabhupada was very keen to try to establish a solid ground in India and to get solid Indian preachers to spread Krishna consciousness, because it's the order of Lord Chaitanya. This is not that this is the only way by any means, but this is a necessary way for spreading Krishna consciousness around the world. And there's much more could be said about that, but we don't have time. I'll just read one or two more quotes on it. This is the battle for Bombay. Prabhupada said the same thing. My Guru Maharaj ordered me to preach Krishna consciousness in the West, and I have done that. Now I want to preach in India. And I don't know if it's also in the lilamrta or somewhere, the battle for Bombay, maybe Guru Maharaj quote. And now Jayapataka Swami. Sometimes Prabhupada would confide in us how his Guru Maharaj had ordered him to preach in the West. He said, my Guru didn't specifically order me to preach in India. So whenever I preached in the West, I was very successful. His idea was to build temples, Prabhupada's idea, in Mayapur and Vrindavan for his Western devotees to come and visit the holy places. But then he said, how could he stand by and see India going to hell? Going to hell means it was on the track of following materialism, consumerism, material so-called civilization. So his idea was to build temples, but then he saw India was going to hell, seeing how Indians were giving away their culture by following the West, becoming degraded in various ways of losing Krishna consciousness, in various ways of losing. And this was very disturbing to Srila Prabhupada. Very disturbing. I mean, you go to the West, you expect people to be, materialistic. But India, supposed to be the land, Bharatvarsh, the holy land. Persons born in Bharata Bhumite Holamanusya Janmajar are supposed to make their life successful by preaching Krishna consciousness, not by imitating the West. So Prabhupada said it was my personal mission to preach in India. Brahmananda Prabhu said that Prabhupada told him, and this is very interesting. Brahmananda quote, Prabhupada passed away a few years ago, of course, but one of his quotes said that the deity, Lord Dwarkadish in Los Angeles, had told him, and that the deity personally spoke to him and ordered him. The deity said, you have to go back to India. and you have to organize the preaching there. So this would have been on Prabhupada's mind, no doubt, because Dwarkadish in Los Angeles, where let's see, well, probably, I don't quote me on that, maybe not, but they were maybe in the first Radha Krishna deities installed by Prabhupada in America. Don't quote me on that, maybe they weren't. But they were certainly one of the first, if not the first. And to Prabhupada considered Los Angeles like his world headquarters at that time particularly. So those deities were very special. And Brahmananda said that Prabhupada said they ordered him to go back to India and preach. So in 1970, on August the 29th, Prabhupada returned to Calcutta. And you may know that when he returned to Calcutta, there was a very grand reception. At that time in Calcutta, maybe in the whole of India, maybe a few more, I don't know. But he certainly had two in Calcutta, Chutananda Japataka. That time were both brahmacharis from America. Canada, America. And they came to the airport, and they'd already been in India for quite some time, quite familiar with the scene, and they'd arranged with the Gaudiya Math devotees, etc., to have a nice kirtan reception party. Everything at the airport. It was a grand event, and many Indian dignitaries came, and they met. Those were very relaxed days, the late 60s, 70s. Was still very relaxed, and the airports were pretty easygoing. There was no fear of terrorism practically. And in many cases, you could go onto the runway itself. So the devotees were right there on the runway, and Prabhupada arrived there, and a great reception, you could say. Of course, when he left Calcutta in 1965 on board the Jaladuta, practically no one in the world was aware or even cared practically about what he was doing, or even if they did, they didn't really think anything would come of it. No one would have expected a few years later he's returning to Calcutta, and along with, in this case, only a handful of Western disciples, but he had hundreds and hundreds of Western disciples in America and Europe at that time, a few elsewhere. Different countries in Australia, maybe a few here and there, but nobody would have expected in their wildest dreams that this elderly sannyasi, who was practically unheard of as far as the world was concerned, even the world of Vaishnavism, was going to be going to America and creating a revolution, a true revolution. The word revolution is a very interesting word. The word revolution means returning to one's original state. So this really is, and Prabhupada was the only revolution on the planet. Everyone else is, an illusion. There's no revolution going on at all. It's a revolution going around in circles, you could say, revolving. Is a revolving illusion, not a revolution. We're going around to nowhere. But Prabhupada was a real revolutionary. He was about to hatch another super plan in India. And this chapter is called The Dancing White Elephants. An interesting title for the chapter. And I was curious to know why Srila Prabhupada used this term. If you know the term white elephant in English, it's not a very complimentary term, to say the least. It means something, you put a lot of effort into something, but it turns out to have no value or very little value or less returns. In other words, it's a bit of a flop. It's a white elephant. It wasn't what you expected it to be. And that's the general kind of, more or less anyway, understanding of the meaning white elephant. So when you say dancing white elephants, you mean dancing, failures, basically speaking. Well, we could look at it in different ways, many ways of looking at that. We could take the original literal meaning of white elephant, because Prabhupada did use that too, in terms of sometimes it would be seen that when an Indian person marries, is not always the case now, it can be the other way around. It's Kali Yuga, things like that. But generally speaking, Western people have a much higher consumption rate in terms of expenditures, etc., than Asian people. they cost quite a lot of money to maintain, because the standard of living is different and expectations are different and so on and so forth. It is not always the case, even in history, but the kind of a term like that is a very costly thing, because originally in Thailand, it used to be called Sham, the name Krishna, Siam, and other parts of that part of the world, many elephants were there. And when a ruler wanted to cause trouble to one of his enemies, he would sometimes give them a whole bunch of white elephants, because they wouldn't do anything productively. They would just eat and cost a lot of money to maintain. So in this way, he would try to ruin his enemies by giving them a lot of white elephants. So it has different connotations. Now, there's another connotation we could take, that the devotees from the West, they were white. Okay, so there's at least half of it's relevant. Elephants, in as much as maybe a little dumb to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, a little bit, let's say, unsophisticated or uncultured when it comes to traditional cultures, the Vedic standard or even human standard is concerned, rather rough around the edges and a bit abrupt, a bit coarse, etc. So we could see it from that point of view, white elephants. Prabhupada would laugh. He coined this statement in this chapter, which we hear a little bit about, on a few occasions, not just on the first occasion in Calcutta, but in Bombay also, when the devotees would dance and chant. Now, white elephants also dance. Sometimes elephants dance. We've heard that, and maybe seen it also. So people like to watch when an elephant dances. When a person dances, we may or may not want to watch, depending on who it is and what dancing they're doing. But when an elephant starts dancing, pretty much everyone will gather around and watch. Even when a dog dances, anything unexpected. So to see white people dancing at that time in 1970 and chanting Hare Krishna was quite a spectacle. Even now, it can create quite a spectacle in many places when devotees, depends where you are, but when they dance and chant, when white people dance and chant in Africa or even in remote parts of India, not so much in the major cities now, they're used to it, but in villages and some people are stunned and astonished and come by the thousands just to watch it, just that they may go to a circus and watch a white elephant dance. So whatever reason it is, somehow or another, Prabhupada coined this statement, dancing white elephants. Because another point of this I was thinking is that the devotees, basically speaking, were all lost. And all of us were lost, even if you're not a Western or Indian, anything, even more so sometimes. They're lost, not knowing where they're going, a failure. All good expectations, born in maybe an affluent family in the West, somewhere, or in India, and then became basically wasting life away. In this case, of course, most of Prabhupada's disciples were hippies. So in that sense, materially speaking, they were like white elephants. Their parents invested tons of money in their education, and they went to university, etc., expecting to become lawyers, doctors, engineers, whatever. And they ended up crazy monks of the Hare Krishna movement, doing no good for nobody, wasting their time, wasting their money. So it's a little like the mundane point of view. There are white elephants in that sense. So Prabhupada picked up, by the graceful arrangement of Krishna, all kinds of amazing personalities who were basically lost in this world as to what direction, what's the goal of life. He picked them up and got them to dance for Krishna. Whereas previously, many times Prabhupada said they were dull, morose, spaced out, etc. So like that. So you can look at this term in many different ways. But let's go a little bit to the subject matter of the chapter, why, how, and Prabhupada. Basically speaking, we can say this is like the Prabhupada arriving in New York and how he introduced Krishna consciousness in Tompkins Square Park, etc., and in San Francisco in America. Very beginning stages. So Prabhupada really had to start again from scratch because preaching in India living in India, existing in India, is a little different than it is in New York or London or San Francisco or wherever they were from, those who were with Prabhupada at that time. Prabhupada came from Tokyo with a few devotees. He'd just given sannyas to two of his devotees, Devananda and Kartikeya had just taken sannyas. Tamal Krishna had not taken sannyas. He was also with Prabhupada, a young, maybe one or two others. And there was a young Japanese boy named Bruce. He just basically, he was actually born in Canada, but he was Japanese family descent. So he joined them in Tokyo, and Prabhupada invited this boy to join him on his journey to India. Quite something. These were special days. Nowadays, people are very hesitant to take such risks usually, or make such rash or quick decisions. But during these times, quick decisions were made, and many things happened in a few days in Krishna conscious movement. It was rapidly evolving, like a baby growing quickly. Babies change quickly. When you get old, you don't change so quickly. Things were changing very quickly. So Bruce agreed to come. Of course, some of you know him. Later on, he was initiated and became Banu Prabhu, now Banu Swami. So Prabhupada picked him up in Tokyo, brought him with him to Calcutta. So small band of devotees arrived there in Calcutta airport, were greeted by these, as we already mentioned. And they went to, they stayed in Calcutta for it. They stayed in one prominent Indian man's house there in Calcutta. And I'm going to read from a little bit here. I had an interview at the airport. And if you have your lilamrta, I don't know, different books there, I can't tell you where, but it's like at the beginning of the second page or the end of the first page, depends which edition you've got, of the lilamrta on this chapter. And there Prabhupada said, they had a kirtan when he arrived, then Prabhupada spoke to him, but he said, I'm coming back to this city. I'm coming back to this city after 3 years, Prabhupada said. There you go. Hare Krishna. I've been around the world and have found that happiness and peace cannot be established in this world by materialistic advancement. I've seen Japan, which is highly advanced in machines and technology, yet there is no real happiness there. But the people of India, even if they do not understand the significance of Sankirtan, they enjoy listening to it. My advice to the Indians is that if you advance only in science and technology, without paying attention to Harinam, then you will remain forever backward. There is tremendous strength in Harinam. Well, that's one different definition of backward. Most people would think in terms of, not living in a nice new house, not having a car, now it would be not having a mobile computer and some other, gadgets. But real, let's say, backwardness is to forget our real business, who we are, how to understand who we are. We've forgotten the most important thing of all. And Prabhupada's mission, he said, was to remind people what they have forgotten. Nothing new, just to remind us that which we've forgotten. We're so absorbed in materialism that we've forgotten entirely about the spiritual nature of life. The Prabhupada very much, especially in India, this is his, as we heard, this is a special mission to ignite Krishna consciousness again, revolution in the hearts of the Indian population. Prabhupada went on in different ways talking about that point. And then a few paragraphs later, Prabhupada replies, my advice is to chant Hare Krishna. This is the piece of advice to both the capitalists and the communists. They said Prabhupada's preaching was generally quite simple, to the point. Please chant Hare Krishna. All animosity between them, communists and capitalists, will cease completely, and all their problems will be solved if they take this advice. It's a fact. And this applies to any situation. It applies to our own hearts. We have division in our own hearts. We have conflicts within our own hearts regularly. And the actual solution, we may try to intellectually adjust things or answer different contradictory situations. But the real solution is, as Prabhupada says here, and his peace formula, which he gave in New York when he was there to chant Hare Krishna. Of course, when we say to chant Hare Krishna, there's always benefit, no matter what. But it really means to chant. It doesn't just mean mechanical. It means with our life and soul. We take shelter of the Hare Krishna mantra by hearing attentively the sound of Krishna's name. Antesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam. Krishna gives us the intelligence by which we can come to him or understand the situation, clears up all the doubts. So Prabhupada's words were very appealing to the people there, and they all very much appreciated that. Another interesting thing, now this is, don't forget that these devotees with Prabhupada, maybe not all of them, but for maybe all of them, I don't know, but it was a new thing for them to entering into India. And Calcutta, perhaps more than other cities, is even more of a contrast. For those who've been to Calcutta, you know it's quite a interesting place. And it was no less interesting, probably even more interesting, way back there in 1970, August, when Prabhupada arrived. It's very hot, more or less it's the monsoon season, so it'd be very, very, very humid. And and maybe you've got memories of this, but my first memory, my first night in Bengal was being, bitten, not quite to death, but as close as you can get to death by countless mosquitoes, which is probably another feature not mentioned here, but I would assume there were also so many, many mosquitoes, as well as the stifling heat and the incredible cacophony of sounds which tend to take place on the streets of Calcutta, and the wonderful drivers. I think Calcutta, Bengal, has some of the most exciting drivers in the world, for those who've been there. And I'm sure it was no different then, although there was basically only those days, I suppose it was all Tata cars and ambassador cars. There was only two kinds of car in India at that time. Most things was taxis, because not many people would afford a car. But there was still plenty of them, and they were everywhere. And, and the first thing Prabhupada said about that was, Tamil, how do you like this driving? Because in the West, it's a little different. It's like horrendous driving. In India, if you've ever had the privilege of driving in the cities in India, it's quite an horrendous experience. We quickly realize there are no highway codes. They don't exist. The main highway code is to blow your horn as loud as you can. Practically, that's the main thing you have to learn. Brakes are a last resort. The horn is 90% the main thing you have to utilize. Anyway, it's a completely different world. These devotees are entering in a completely different world. Only Prabhupada. Now, of course, Jataka and Janananda had some experience already. They were kind of familiar, but in practical terms, Prabhupada was the only one who really knew how to deal with these situations. And they arrived at the house of the host. What was his name? I can't remember. Dr. Dasgupta, Mr. Dasgupta. And they arrived at his house somewhere in Calcutta about midnight, really late at night. For most people, that's like way past bedtime. But when Prabhupada arrived, Prabhupada wasn't thinking of that, leave me alone now, I just want to take rest. Prabhupada was, I think earlier on, Ramai said something about you won't leave me alone. Well, please don't take that literally. But with Prabhupada, he was 12 o'clock midnight after a long flight from Tokyo, and a busy time in Tokyo with various things, was still very eager as he arrived with his mission, to unleash his mission. And there in that house immediately, people were coming to see him at midnight. And it's very common in those days that he would stay up late night. The opportunity to see a sadhu is so rare. People at that time particularly, although they may have been young ones, have particularly been drawn by materialism, many elderly persons, particularly elderly persons, were so cultured And they had so much respect for sadhus, maybe not very intelligently understanding what is a sadhu, but so much respect that so many of them came to see Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's servant, whoever it was, Kartikeya or Devananda, they said, no, it's too late. Swamiji can't see you now. Prabhupada said, no, let them in, let them come in. And he would preach. He just somehow, so Prabhupada's only life, he had no other business other than to give Krishna consciousness to others. He was an opportunity to lighten or ignite the flame of Krishna consciousness in some interested in. Even his own sister came. She has always Bhavatrini, turned up there wherever Prabhupada was staying with a whole array of delicious preparations cooked in her unique style. And there was a saying, we can't eat at this time of night. And Prabhupada said, I have to eat. Well, my sister lives for cooking for me. I have to eat what she cooks. Even if it killed him, perhaps he would probably eat it, even though sometimes he said it's killing me. He couldn't, it was his mood of Prabhupada. He would accept the service of others. How he accepted it, but he would always encourage a little child or unknowing person on the street, a bum in New York, he would accept their service somehow or another. This is the business of a Brahmin, of an Acharya, is to draw people's energy towards Krishna, always accepting whatever their offerings are, basically, and utilizing it. And Prabhupada was like that so much, and he was demonstrating this here in India. Because he was home, Prabhupada felt like he was in his home. Calcutta is his home. And it's just like Prabhupada said, it's a place of worship, Mayapur, but India is his home. And he was always at home in India, more or less, except for when bizarre behavior took place by leaders and others. But otherwise, it was his home. And he was showing how we could be at home in India too, by his interactions and dealings with people. Very personal, very personal. To accept this service. And then the Gaudiya Master also came with many, many preparations. Now, Prabhupada hadn't been there for very long, and about 1 o'clock in the morning before he took his rest. He wasn't there very long. The devotees started to go out on Sankirtan and on the streets of Calcutta. There's a small band of maybe 7 or 8, 10 devotees at most, going out regularly, chanting, and dancing in the streets. And they were having great success in one sense. Many people would gather around. They were becoming kind of the talk of the town almost. White people dancing and chanting, dressed like Hindus. What is this? What's going on? Whereas all the Hindus were trying to adopt Western habits, Western dress. It's like ironic. I remember one time I was outside the Gundicha Mandir in Puri, when white people are not allowed in. I sat out and they're saying, no, you can't come in. Hindus only. So we're watching the Hindus only going in with their coat and pant on, shirts, coats, pants, shoes taken off, of course. Cigarette, put the cigarette out before you go in. Hindus only. It's kind of funny. You can't help but laugh at the contradictory situation which we're in this age of Kali, where religion is accepted as irreligion, etc. So Prabhupada knew, how to deal with this and how to transform or reform the situation. So they had to devote, because this is the movement up to that point in 1970. The only basic preaching activity was based around Harinam Sankirtan. Whatever little donations came in, let it be. But basically the only activity, at least for those living in the temple, was Harinam Sankirtan. They were going to the streets all over, everywhere, wherever they were, and just chant and dance on the street and distribute a few magazines. There's no books practically at that time. And in Calcutta, they had absolutely no literature whatsoever. So they were just going out and dancing and chanting in the streets. So Prabhupada had another plan. And this was evident from his time in Tokyo as well. It can be seen. He hasn't quite hatched the plot yet. And Prabhupada, he knew how his disciples, like we said earlier, dancing white elephants, everyone would come to watch. He knew when his dancing white elephants went out on the streets, everyone would be coming around by the thousands. It's like, what's going on here? It's like something never seen before, never even dreamed of. White people from America and Europe coming here and doing what we're supposed to be doing, chanting and dancing and singing the holy names of Krishna, the Hindu gods. What's going on? We were taken aback. So it was quite a startling experience, you could say. So Prabhupada knew the great appeal his disciples would have. Everyone would want to see them. He therefore affectionately called them his dancing white elephants. Very powerful. He loved it. He just liked, very familiar, especially in India. Prabhupada was in these days extremely familiar with his disciples. They were just like living with your kids in the same house, very intimate, very familiar. And, the devotees could interact with Prabhupada in such an intimate way. It was something, it must have been, something you could never experience. And it's just those devotees were very special devotees, and very special interactions with Prabhupada. Let's see what else. We'll go on a little bit. So after a few days like this, Prabhupada said, stop it. He stopped the Harinam on the streets. He said, no. People will eventually, at first it was a tremendous, you could say, introduction. Then Prabhupada said they will see us just like many kirtan groups are there, just like beggars. And more important is that we have to establish ourselves solidly here in India. People will take us seriously. So then he introduced this program, which again, is not called the same name much now, but called the Life Membership Program. And perhaps you have it in Mauritius, I do not know. But it was very big in the early 70s in ISKCON. I would introduce this program where affluent or anybody would come to that, but especially in those days, it had to be someone who was a little bit affluent because you had to pay money. So the grand sum of 1,100 rupees entitled you to become a life member of ISKCON and entitled you to get all the publications that ever came out in ISKCON and or back to God at every month. So, and you could stay free of charge in any ISKCON temple for 3 days. Quite a good deal, to say the least. Of course, the rupee was worth a lot more in those days, maybe a few $100s in those days. I don't know exactly, but probably a couple of $100 or something in those days. Still, it wasn't very much really, but Prabhupada's idea of this life membership program wasn't just to make money. It meant really to establish our movement on a solid foundation amongst people who were influential. Because those who became life members were mostly like lawyers, doctors, businessmen, like that, different kind of dignitaries or persons of some significance, influential people in society. And how he's going to do that? By preaching to them, not just getting money off of them. The problem with the life membership program, it became more of a money-making machine than a devotee-making program. Prabhupada wanted these people to become members of our movement, not just on paper, but in reality. They will be, our supporters to establish our movement in India and beyond on firm ground. So he had this intention of these books were meant to come and all the members were meant to get a set of Krishna books, Bhagavad Gita, this, that, the other. And this way, he also saw this as a great opportunity to increase the book distribution because the people in general at that time could not afford books. And that would come later. That was another wave. But first wave to try to get some solid support because these people were interested, especially in Calcutta. Many cultured people that are there and certainly were there at that time. So Prabhupada had that in mind very strongly. Let's see, we'll move on a little bit here. And there in Calcutta, Prabhupada began to teach devotees how to live. Now, every country has a different, expectation. I'm sure in Mauritius it's not quite the same as India, although some things are more in common than, say, France, where we are here. We have beautiful deities here, Krishna, Balaram, Radha and Krishna, Gaurnitai, installed by Prabhupada, as Ramai Prabhu said, these Krishna Bharan were. And a nice property here, some of you have been. And Prabhupada himself established these various temples around the world. And I'll just read a little bit something to you. But these standards in different places were not always exactly the same. Hey, time flies, doesn't it? What to do? I don't know where to begin now. We have hardly begun. Okay, I won't read this one. I'll read a bit of it. It is not necessary, Prabhupada said, this is from Chaitanya Chapter, which you won't be able to get it in a short time. Yeah. It is not necessary that the rules and regulations followed in India be exactly the same as those in Europe, America, and other Western countries. Simply imitating without effect is called niyama agraha. Not following is instead is also called niyama agraha. Following just for the sake of it, without any effect, is niyama agraha, and not following at all, so niyama agraha. The word niyama means regulate. Prince Prabhupada goes on to describe that. So this is a very important point in the actual preaching of Prabhupada's movement. It wasn't like the same thing. The devotees came, they just continued to, all they knew was what they knew. There were many things to effectively spread Krishna consciousness in India, which they were not aware of. Prabhupada was fully aware, and he was just seeing when the time is right to hatch it. So now the time came to hatch the Life Membership Program, to capture many influential Indian people who could establish Krishna consciousness on firm. Otherwise, although they were fascinated by the devotees, most of the kind of, I'd say, leaders of society would have looked at it as just a fad, just a temporary fad, nothing that will last. Bunch of hippies, you know, probably drug takers. They were depicted sometimes as drug-taking hippies, you know, who are just kind of, you know, out for a good time, lazy people, useless people, sudras, all kinds of different terms were placed to them, and not really appreciating actual what the Prabhupada has actually done, how he transformed these white elephants into pure devotees of the Lord. So Prabhupada says, to broadcast a cult of Krishna consciousness, one has to learn the possibility of renunciation in terms of country, time, and candidate. A candidate for Krishna consciousness in the Western countries should be taught about renunciation of material existence, but one would teach candidates from a country like India in a different way. The teacher has to consider time, candidate, and country. He must avoid the principle of niyamagraha. He should not try to perform the impossible. What is possible in one country may not be possible in another. The Acharya's duty is to accept the essence of devotional service. There may be a little change here and there as far as yukta vairagya, proper renunciation, is concerned. Dry renunciation is forbidden by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we have also learned this from our spiritual master. The essence of devotional service must be taken into consideration and not the outward paraphernalia. The essence. What achieves the goal? Prabhupada's goal to spread the mission of Lord Chaitanya in India. So no one really had a clue how to do that. They only knew what they knew from a different situation. But Prabhupada is demonstrating this yukta vairagya, this principle, most important principle of Rupa Goswami. What is real renunciation? Yes, the essence of devotional service must be taken, not the outward paraphernalia. Sometimes we get totally captivated by the outward paraphernalia and fight with each other over the outward paraphernalia. You know, and people become depressed, they can't up to the standard, they cannot come, etc., etc. But the Acharya sees how to encourage people to, you know, I'd say work towards the essence according to the time, place, and circumstances. Janananda Goswami wrote his Hari Bhakti Vilas, which was specifically meant for India. Let's get back down, we just lost it. Specifically meant for India. In those days, India was more or less following the principles of Smarta Vidhi. So Sanatana Goswami had to keep pace with this, and his Hari Bhakti Vilas was compiled with this in mind. According to Smarta Brahmins, a person not born in a Brahmin family could not be elevated to the position of Brahmin. But Sanatana Goswami says, Yata kanchanatam yati kancham rasa vidanata tatatiksha vidanina dvijatam jayate vinam. So Prabhupada quotes this verse. And he used this same argument when people criticize his disciples. Yes, you may be like, bell metal, you may be like dull, but by proper initiation, anyone can be transformed into a Brahmin. But Prabhupada taught very strongly in India that how the devotees' activities, their purity, would be the effectual, the factor which would evoke change, the purity. He emphasizes so many times the behavior, particularly in India. Now, in the West, if you're seen talking with a girl, brahmachari with a girl in public, no one will say anything, they don't know. But in India, such a thing would be abominable, an abominable thing. Or see sitting in a cafe, drinking a limca. I don't know if they still have limcas, but things like that. Or just behaving in coarse ways, unknown, or unclean ways, accepting a gift in the left hand, or not washing after eating. Different things like this, which people, at least cultured people, would immediately notice, and your preaching is basically useless because externals are noted. And Prabhupada was teaching the devotees every little thing, how to use the toilet. Who knows in the West how to use a toilet? Little things, how to clean after passing stool, washing your hands properly, how to not to step over where you've been eating, all kinds of things he was teaching them, because little things they may seem insignificant and hardly related to the essence, but the essence of being there, you don't go somewhere for the sake of it, you go there for a purpose. And the purpose of Prabhupada coming back to India was to preach. And if behavior, the religious principles, Lord Chaitanya said, are established by the behavior of a devotee, according to time and circumstance. So behaving properly, Prabhupada taught everything, how to drink water, how to eat properly, how to receive and give, everything he taught, not just the philosophy, not just chanting Hare Krishna, because all these other aspects, people would immediately not listen after that. Oh, they're just low class. So Prabhupada very strongly emphasized this. Now Prabhupada had to deal with everything. Nobody knew anything. At the same time, he was completely thinking of, there were so many problems going on at that time. Devotees in America had been preaching Mayavad philosophy. They were saying Prabhupada is God. And Prabhupada it was like when he was in Tokyo, all this blew up. And it was a big, you could say, headache. This is the biggest, Mayavad philosophy is the biggest threat to the spreading of Krishna consciousness in terms of philosophy. It's the biggest obstacle in our own spiritual lives, is this impersonalistic approach or understanding of the absolute truth. That everything is one, or God is, there are many gods, or there's no God, a guru is God. All these things are impersonalistic tendencies. So Prabhupada had to deal with this. So when he was there, some of his disciples, like Achyutananda and Javataka, well, Achyutananda actually asked to take sannyas. He said, I think, now consider he's only been in the movement 3 or 4 years. He thought, if I take sannyas, it'll be much better for the preaching. Lord Chaitanya did it. People will respect. So definitely in that sense, providing the devotee behaves in a way which is appropriate. Otherwise, they won't respect at all. So Prabhupada agreed, yes, and he also asked Javataka. For in 1970, they took sannyas. So now Prabhupada had quite a few sannyas disciples at this time. Not all of them made it, but Javataka Maharaj exemplary made it. You could say more than made it. But he probably was eager because he needed time and circumstance to preach Krishna consciousness. Sannyas, especially in India, sannyasis, renunciates were needed, but he had to train them how to be genuine and not just carrying a stick and saying they're a sannyasi, etc., etc. Prabhupada also, when he was in Calcutta, wanted to establish a temple in Calcutta. In India, this was a big thing. Now, outside of India, initially Prabhupada opened up temples and preaching centers. Later on, and maybe 76, 77, Prabhupada was emphasizing more farms. And he wasn't emphasizing temples much, not in the West. In India, he was emphasizing, because in India, time and circumstances, temples are very effective in many ways. They can be effective anywhere, but particularly in India. But Prabhupada was emphasizing in the West more preaching centers, restaurants, farms. practical, very practical ways of engaging people in devotional service, living a living example of Krishna consciousness, not just a theoretical or a religious presentation, but a living process. Farming, varnashram was also emphasized, and restaurants, other things too. Different time instruction. Prabhupada was not stayed in his preaching techniques. He would change immediately if it was effectual. He wasn't stuck in a rut like some people are. The needful to spread Krishna consciousness. So this chapter is all about this. But the one thing that sticks out in this chapter above everything is no matter what other programs are going on, Prabhupada emphasizes chanting the holy names. Now, he went to Mayapur and he tried to see if he could get land in Mayapur at that time. Nothing came up. The weather was so monsoons and everything was flooded. He couldn't get to where he wanted to, so they didn't get anywhere. And he had an invitation to go to Bombay. He took it. He went to Bombay for some sadhu samaj or something there. And he spoke there a little bit also at that sadhu samaj. But mainly when he went to Bombay, Bombay was a materialistic city of India, rich city compared to the other cities. And he stayed with Seksaria in the Seksaria house, or Mr. Seksaria, a very rich businessman, who gave his 7-story building practically to the devotees to utilize. Amazing place. And they stayed there for quite some time. And Prabhupada was preaching regularly, both there and in different programs, and particularly on Chowpatty Beach at this Samaj program, this meeting of great many so-called sadhus, sadhu samajas, yogis and swamis and all this and that, all kinds of different characters. And Prabhupada came there with his disciples. There's like 10,000 people there gathered in a pandal type area, open but like a pandal. And they're all dry as bones, talking about impersonalism and, you know, how we can get sadhachar, how people behave properly, which Prabhupada took up on that. And he said, yes, I like to take up on the point of Swami, or whatever his name is, Akilananda or something, who was emphasizing sadhachar, proper behavior. Proper behavior can be, and we would totally agree. And our process for that is kirtan. And he just had the devotees chant. And then Prabhupada started chanting, leading the kirtan. Everyone else is talking. And Prabhupada, after a couple of minutes, just started the kirtan and just chanted and chanted. And the devotees were going ecstatic. The people were about to leave because it started to rain, but then they all stopped. And the devotees jumped off the stage and danced and danced and danced. And the whole audience was going crazy. And people were dancing like anything. It took ages to settle everyone down after the kirtan. And Prabhupada just spoke for a few minutes after the others have spoken for ages. Let's see what Prabhupada said as we begin chanting. Prabhupada said, yes, listen to this. This is, I don't know, page 888 in my lilamrta, but it's really wonderful. Just a couple of minutes he spoke. And he said, now we are saving wholesale jagais and madais. First he said, how can we make everyone accustomed to take up good habits, sadhachar? I think in Kali Yuga there are many faults, and Prabhupada then explained Lord Chaitanya and how he delivered the jagais and madais, and said, we are delivering jagais and madais. Therefore, if we want peace, if we want to be situated on the sadhachar platform, we must spread the Harinam Mahamantra all over the world. And it has been practically proven. The American, European Vaishnavas who have come here, who have chanted Hare Krishna mantra, they were cow flesh eaters. Not meat eaters, cow flesh eaters. They were drunkards, illicit sex mongers. They were all kinds of gamblers. But having taken to this Krishna conscious movement, they have given up everything abominable. Sadhachar has come automatically. You don't have to make a separate endeavor. By taking to the Harinam, automatically you lose interest in these other things. There are no more meat eaters, no more gamblers, no more illicit sex mongers, no more intoxicators. They do not even take tea. Imagine all these Indian people here are all addicted to tea. And they do not even take coffee. They do not even smoke, which I think is very rare to be found in India. A man anyway, ladies, of course. But the men all eat, drink tea, smoke, maybe coffee or not. But they have given up. Why? Because they have taken to this Krishna consciousness. He ended his talk after about 5 minutes. He only spoke for 5 minutes. He said, I do not feel that I have much to say. You can see what is the result of Krishna consciousness. It's not something artificial. It is there in everyone. I have not done anything magical, but this Krishna consciousness is present in all of us. We simply have to revive it. This is Prabhupada's mission, to revive Krishna consciousness. There's no other solution to the world's woes, the world's problems, other than the Sangatana movement. So when Prabhupada was in Bombay, he was joined about 20 devotees. One of the interesting things, whenever Prabhupada would come to London, I was in London in 71, so it wasn't at this time. But whenever Prabhupada would come through, he'd say, so who can come to India? Whatever the situation, you would take anything from 1 to 10 devotees with him on to India. It wasn't like, oh, well, we'll think about it, Prabhupada. Maybe in a few weeks' time we can free one. Prabhupada said, now, somehow or another, probably may only stay 4 days, but 1 to 10 devotees in that period of time had to be off to India with Prabhupada, especially England, because they didn't need visas. English people didn't know visa in those days to stay in India. So Prabhupada was very keen on English people coming back to India. So Prabhupada in Bombay, about 20 devotees, Shamsundar and Gurudas and their wives and Giriraj, many others joined Prabhupada there in Bombay in 1970 to assist, and they did these wonderful they were also going on Harinam around all the bazaars in Bombay, but again, Prabhupada, had to get into life membership. But that doesn't mean forevermore. Time, place, and circumstance. Sometimes we don't judge. It's that which works, that which is effective. If we know what the essence is or our goals are, what is effective to reach our goal. And same in any sport, any activity. There's no point doing what worked over there if it doesn't work over here. We've got to see what will help us to achieve our objective goals. So Prabhupada, he is very much emphasizing on this. I'll just read another little thing that Prabhupada said in another program. He said to the Indian people, said in Mr. Shaksharia's house, he said, you are all very intelligent people. You were all very learned and educated. You were all very great persons. Prabhupada used this technique in India particularly, the technique of Prabodhananda, where you take a piece of grass and new mouse. You were a very great man. You were most qualified. Okay, what do you want? What do you want? And then Prabhupada said, I beg you. I take the straw of the street between my teeth, and I beg you, just please chant Hare Krishna. Chant Hare Krishna. That was what Prabhupada was requesting, begging people to chant Hare Krishna. All the way through, we see this. He was very concerned because his books were not coming, and he really needed it for his program there. He sent Tamal Krishna Maharaj to Calcutta to try to see if they could be cleared from the doctor. There was a strike. Eventually, they got the books, but in the meantime, Prabhupada went off to Amritsar with a group of those 20 devotees. He left some in Bombay, sent some more to Calcutta to preach there. And with about maybe 10 devotees, he went off to Amritsar and preached in Amritsar, some program there. And he very much liked Amritsar. It said that when he was there, he never stopped preaching morning to night. From the moment he woke to the moment he rested, practically he was preaching all day, 7-8 programs a day. He really liked the Golden Temple. I don't know if anyone's been there. The Sikhs have this Golden Temple in Amritsar. It's very famous. And what did Prabhupada like about it, besides the wonderful hospitality and the organization, which was impeccable? He loved it. They were just doing every day 10,000 plates of free vegetarian food. And they were prasad, and they also called it prasad. And Prabhupada said, this is real prasad distribution. And in one way, this was the start of our Food for Life program. Not physically, but in terms of, this is really good. And he really wanted us to do this Food for Life program, distributing prasadam to everybody. And Prabhupada wrote, they have a book there, and he signed it. Prabhupada said, this is how to distribute prasadam, Prabhupada said. And they used to cook chapatis and, rice, well, not rice up there, chapatis and sabji and this dal and so on and so forth. And Prabhupada signed the guest book. He said, under religion, he wrote Krishnite. He didn't bring Krishnite. And under comments, he wrote very spiritual. He appreciated it. He appreciated their. In other words, another example there of Prabhupada taking in learning from others, even though it may not have been pure Krishna consciousness. He learned how they were being effectual, and by distributing vast quantities of prasadam in a very nice way, without any demand or expectation. Just a mood of giving, and a mood of constant preaching. Prabhupada taught this in India, this sacrifice. And the devotees were just, I can imagine how it was, just following Prabhupada around. It was just like a traveling, non-stop festival, roadshow, almost impossible to keep up with. Prabhupada was moving at such a pace, inconceivable pace. And then Prabhupada, after some time there, he returned to Bombay on the train. Now, a wonderful thing, another lesson, Prabhupada, on the train. Now, on the train, there was, I guess, Guru Das. Yeah, Guru Das and his wife were there, Giriraj, and several others. Koshalya was there on the train, going back to Bombay. The train from Amritsar stopped in Delhi, but before it reached Delhi, there was a very interesting experience. Prabhupada decided he wanted to eat hot rice immediately. Of course, he didn't want to take the rice from the restaurant, so he sent Jamuna and Koshalya, two of his female disciples, to go and bring hot rice. Well, there was no hot rice, and they had to cook it as well. They had rice, so they went off to the restaurant, and there was just two laborers there, and they said, no way, you can't come here. Then they talked to the manager of the restaurant. No, you can't cook here. No way. They only had big stoves and big pots. And they said, we have to, it's our guru. You can't say no. He said, I can say no. So then they got the conductor of the train, who they convinced him. They said, if we can't do this, we're going to jump off this train. And the conductor was almost forced to allow them to cook, to very enthusiastic young American girls, insisting, you have to let us cook this for our Guru Maharaj, otherwise we're going to jump off the train. So he went there and told the conductor told the head of the kitchen, you have to let these girls cook. So they cooked this big pot of hot rice, boiling hot rice with ghee and stuff. And they quickly brought it to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was so pleased. An example here, Prabhupada said, oh, my goddesses of fortune have come. They have brought me my rice. Thank you very much. This is just what I wanted. He ate so much from that huge plate, and he took a little kachori and puri with it and a little pickle. He was very pleased. This is how we please the Spirit. Nothing is impossible when he gives an instruction like this. It is possible, the empowerment to fulfill it. Pure devotee, because Krishna fulfills the desire of his pure devotees, whether we're like Krishna fighting on the battle of Kurukshetra, impossible feat. But because Krishna was there, everything became possible. So they did the impossible here. And another incredible thing happened on that train. The train pulled into Delhi, and one man who had been writing to Prabhupada, someone heard that Prabhupada was on the train, and which train. He just jumped on the train and found out where Prabhupada was. He came into his apartment, and Prabhupada, greeted him. And he said, in Delhi, we should start a center here right now. Please, can you come and preach here in Delhi? And Prabhupada said, I'm sorry, I can't come myself. And the man was so enthusiastic, Prabhupada said, okay, well, I will send my disciples. So right there and then, he sent 5 of his disciples off the train. It only stopped for about 15 minutes. And he sent them off the train, said, you have to stay here now and establish the temple here in Delhi. Just ship them off the train. It was like, we can't imagine, practically speaking, such a thing happening nowadays. Possible, but I never heard of it. But in those days, that's what it was like. Whatever Prabhupada said, that was their life and soul. And it could still be the same thing now. It may not be so easy or practical to go into that situation, but the mood is not that there's anything different in the sense in adopting the mood, we could say. Prabhupada, everything was possible. He said impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. So he just sent them off, and sure enough, they stayed in Delhi. And after some time, Guru Das, his wife, went to Vrindavan, established something in Vrindavan. In this way, Prabhupada was planting all the seeds, and he was also teaching how to cultivate those seeds. And it wasn't just, may have been slightly different than it was in the West. This is the big lesson of preaching according to time and circumstance, and how this movement spread. And eventually now, as we all see in India now, Krishna consciousness is so very prominent. And I'll just finish off here at the end of this chapter, practically speaking. Prabhupada remained in Bombay for some time, moved to a different place. And people were still doubting, oh, you have many disciples here with you, Swamiji, but, you know, what will happen when you've gone? You know, they won't be able to keep going. You know, they've all got their samskaras from the West, you know. And it's a fact for many people, it's difficult to keep going without proper association, or if we're not very not very able to strictly follow, etc., etc. So many challenges come along. But Prabhupada said, reminded that him, the man he was staying with, that all of his disciples had been initiated into the chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and that according to the Vedic scripture, the constant chanting of the Lord's holy name will save even the most fallen souls and protect them from falling again. Even after his passing away, Prabhupada predicted his disciples would not fall victim to Maya as long as they continued their prescribed chanting. So again, he's emphasizing the chanting. Now, whatever technique it is to spread the holy name, but the mission of Prabhupada, whether it's in America, India, Africa, China, Australia, Russia, Europe, wherever, the mission, the point is the same, to spread the holy name. It's just that the technique or the methodology may be slightly different. The rules and regulations may be slightly different, but the essence remains the same. So what we have to get in our heart of hearts is to understand what the essence of this movement is. The formation of ISKCON, even the rules and regulations we follow are all meant to be simply supports to achieving the essential goal of becoming completely absorbed in chanting the holy name of Krishna and giving that holy name to others. And this is the message of this chapter, the dancing white elephants. So I will finish there. Hare Krishna. I think we still have a few minutes left, maybe 10 or 15 minutes if anyone wants to ask anything, or if there's anyone left to ask anything. Maybe there's no one left out there, I don't know.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, we're still there. Miracle. Somebody's still there.
Yes, a lot of devotees are still here. Thank you, Maharaj. We really enjoyed that presentation of this wonderful chapter for entitled India Dancing White Elephant. Maharaj, I've learned so much from you tonight, especially the way, the zeal and the enthusiasm that you showed while speaking about Srila Prabhupada. It inspires us to know more and more. And also it makes me personally feel how much less I've been knowing about Srila Prabhupada and how much more we have to know again more. So thank you, Maharaj, for saying, Prabhupada taught us how to plant and cultivate the seed. Indeed. And with these few words, dearest friends and devotees, I would humbly request and suggest, if you have any comment or question, please click on your virtual hand so that we may allow you to come forward and ask your question. Or
well, you can also put them on the chat if they're using Skype, Zoom. You can put them on chat.
Yes. We have Marge. We have one question on the chat. It's from Rajendranandan Das Prabhu.
On chat.
Yes. So I would read it. Hare Krishna Maharaj, may we know how you met Srila Prabhupada? Wow, this is a nice question.
Yeah.
I was going to ask that. Thank you, Prabhu.
I'm still wondering if I'll ever really meet him. There's different levels of meet, and my understanding is different levels of meeting a pure devotee. As Krishna says, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. We may think we know Krishna, but how much we know and how much Krishna is revealing is not necessarily the same. In the same with the pure devotee of the Lord. Of course, he's more merciful than Krishna, and he does everything he can to reveal, even if we don't want to. But you know, you can't force. You can take a cow to water, you can't force it to drink. So you know, Prabhupada gave his mercy, and it still does give his mercy to everyone. It's a matter of how much we take it. So, meeting Srila Prabhupada, we can say on the platform of the Vani, of the Vapu, rather the form, the externals is easy to define. Really meeting Srila Prabhupada on the internal plane, as I can feel with these devotees who are with Prabhupada when reading this lilamrta. I read a little bit, I didn't finish reading, I read a little bit of another fabulous book about a part of this history, which is called Chasing Rhinos. Two interesting terms, chasing rhinos and dancing white elephants, you know. They're both kind of extraordinary terminology for, you know, a title. But Chasing Rhinos by Shyam Sundar really takes us into intimacy and depth of being with Prabhupada. So I would suggest you read that book also by Shyam Sundar. There's also Giriraj Maharaj. He doesn't deal much with this particular time in history. His pastime or his presentation is more a little bit later in Bombay, later years of Prabhupada in Bombay. But nonetheless, something is there. But how did I first meet Prabhupada? Well, we're talking externally, internally. It's a matter of our surrender. It's a matter of our embracing his vani. The sadhus say that we can understand or experience the association of the vapu through vani, not the other way around. Through following the vani, one can really associate or understand the vapu, or the personal meeting or association with a pure devotee. Otherwise, it's mixed or externally mixed, or it's whatever. It's not necessarily pure. So when did I first meet Prabhupada? Well, it depends again how we define Prabhupada. If we mean in the terms of his physical presence, which is probably what you mean, not so much in terms of when I first came in contact with his books, because that's another year, almost a year before. But in 1972, having joined the temple at the beginning of 72 in London, we were in Bury Place. There was no manor, there was no Soho Street in those days, it was just Bury Place. And the temple was quite crowded. But in 1972 also, in June, we received news that Srila Prabhupada was coming to London for the Ratha Yatra. In July, the beginning of July. So, of course, I was, frankly speaking, for better or for worse, sincerely or insincerely, I was always more of one to serve the vani rather than the vapu. It's always been my nature. So I wasn't as kind of excited or overwhelmed, you could say, as some in terms of expectation, because I felt that Prabhupada was already present in full in his vani. But then, of course, the idea, the excitement or whatever of the whole temple was there, and anticipation, or because even on a dry person like myself, there was something there. And so when Prabhupada finally came a few days before the Rath Yatra, the beginning of July 72. So I first met him, you could say, or first saw him, we'll call it what you may, because we were sent. Prabhupada was arriving at Heathrow Airport, and the temple managers had arranged a reception for Prabhupada at the airport, a VIP reception, and a hall had been presumably rented for that purpose. And there were supposed to be many press people and newspapers and maybe television, I don't know, but different types of reporters were supposed to come to interview or hear from Prabhupada at this press conference or whatever it is, reception hall. And Prabhupada was supposed to arrive, I'm not mistaken, around about 11:30, something like that, coming from somewhere, I don't know where it was, flying into London. So the temple managers asked 4 or 5 of us, 5 to be exact, to go to the airport to prepare this reception room. So we drove to the airport in a Spiritual Sky truck. At that time, I'd been doing Spiritual Sky incense. And so probably I drove, most likely, because I may have been the only one in the whole temple with a license to drive. So I drove. There were others would drive, but they didn't have licenses usually. So I drove, or someone drove, and we went to the airport in this van, Spiritual Sky van, as we would call it, like a truck, a small truck. And we then, in those days it was cheap to park, not like now. And we went to the place, the room, and we started cleaning it and to clean the room. And then getting all the chairs out, the tables. We brought in this van a big feast for the press people, maybe 6-course breakfast or lunch, brunch, whatever, different things. And Jayahari Prabhu, who was a little bit knowledgeable, a little bit older devotee, is already initiated. he'd gone off to try to see that all the arrangements were made for Prabhupada to clear immigration and so on without any hassle. And we, 4 of us, were in the hall. I brought the Vyasa with us to this press conference place, this reception room. Mahavishnu, now Swami and Swineboard, same Swineboard again, they were like builders. They were putting the Vyasa together. And my job was to put all the chairs out in lines, hundreds of chairs. And the devotee named Dhiranayaka Prabhu, his role was to, not much, his role was just to put all the prasadam on the tables and get everything ready for when they came, the drinks and the this and the that. So we were there very early, just in case any problem involved. So it probably was about 9:30. We were already started getting everything ready. I was putting some chairs out. And all of a sudden, Jai Hari came into the reception room, the room where the press conference was meant to be, and he declared to all of us. I thought it was a test run, like they do with fire. Sometimes they suddenly say, they ring the bell and you think it's a fire, but it's just a test run, right? So I thought it was a test run. He came in and he said, "Prabhupada's already here." And it's like, stunned, we didn't move, know what to think. At least I didn't. I don't know what everyone else thought. But there was no one else in the room. Nobody had arrived. No press were there, no devotees other than the 4 of us were in the room. And so then within seconds of him saying that, Prabhupada walked in the door of that room, completely empty room. I was behind chairs. Dhiranayaka was behind the prasadam pots, and Mahavishnu and Swineboard were behind the Vyasa screwing it up. And Prabhupada walked in. It was just a Vyasa at the far end of the room and no devotees. And I saw him walk. He kind of looked and he just walked straight up to the Vyasa and sat on the Vyasa, and there was nobody in the room except for him, Jai Hari, and Nanda Kumar. And that may be it. I think Shamsundar was off somewhere. Maybe one other, maybe Bhajuna was there too. He was there, but I don't know if he came in immediately with Prabhupada. Nanda Kumar was Prabhupada's servant, and he came in. And probably Bhajuna too. So there's just those 3. And that was it. No one else. Prabhupada couldn't see anyone else. And he looked around the room, and I was behind the chairs. I was kind of I don't know, scared was the word. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was like, what happens if I poke my nose up? He might speak to me, and I don't know what I'm going to say. So I was just watching from behind the chairs, And Prabhupada said, "Where are all the devotees?" And then Jai Hari said, "Oh, Prabhupada, they're all at the temple. We thought you were coming in 2 hours' time. They haven't come." "Oh," Prabhupada said, "then we will go to the temple. But we have a press conference." We'll sit there for 2 hours for the press conference to come. So he decided he would go back to the temple. But before he went, he saw it was pots. So he said, "What is this?" He said, and then Jai Hari said, "This is prasadam, Prabhupada, for the press people." Oh, because Prabhupada was morning time, so Prabhupada wanted to have breakfast. So he had his breakfast right there, sitting on the Vyasa. I took a plate from each thing, and he really took a plate of each preparation, not each preparation, but on a plate, a bit of each preparation was placed. And Prabhupada really liked this chira, chabda, this fried, nuts and potatoes and besan flour, fried all together, crispy and spicy. Prabhupada really liked that preparation. That was one of his favorites, and he filled up his whole tiffin full with his preparation, took it back with him. And so then they all left. And I don't know if they went in that van. I guess they must have taken the van. I don't know if Prabhupada went in that or he took a taxi. I'm not sure. But he and his luggage and his servants and Jai Hari all went back to the temple. And we 4 were stuck at the airport till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't see him at all. We just saw him when he arrived. He went back, gave a talk. We were just fasting all day long at the airport. They took all the prasadam with them too. And we just had to put everything back and wait for someone to come. We had no money to make a phone call. We had no money to take a train. We had no money to go anywhere. We were just waiting for someone to remember we were all stuck at the airport. They came back and picked us up later in the afternoon. But it was kind of funny way to first meet one spiritual master, you could say. But we have to be prepared because we don't know when he's going to come. In the real sense of the term, Krishna is always there. We just don't see him. So Prabhupada was also training us to be ready, not just to wait. Everything we plan, but we have to be ready every moment. Not that, I'll be Krishna conscious when he's there, and then he's not there, forget it. but he might, every moment he's there, Krishna's there, to training us to be Krishna conscious, be prepared every moment. Yeah, the kheer making that they made, no, it's just plain rice. It wasn't kheer, it was just white rice, cooked, boiled rice. It wasn't kheer, kheer was just boiled rice with ghee. Prabhupada, well, many people love it too. Hot rice with black pepper, salt, and ghee. It's like a feast if it's cooked properly and it's hot. Prabhupada, really, Lord Chaitanya loved that. He loved it. Please tell us the difficulties when preaching in UK or other countries. I can tell you a lot about France, but I won't.
Please share with us, Maharaj. Please share with us.
I have time. I'll be here. I won't be able to do any preaching. I'll be forevermore telling the last 10 years in France. You know, it'll take me 10 years to tell you 10 years. I'll be dead by the time I finish. Now we got to get on with it. There's not really any difficulty. Prabhupada said, and if you ever read Shruti Kirti Prabhu's remembrances, his diary, what is the difficulty? Yeah? Prabhupada said, what is the difficulty? Difficulty is when we forget Krishna. So what depends what we mean by difficulty. If we mean opportunities which Krishna gives to surrender, or we mean opportunities to give up, or things we don't like, or whatever. The real difficulty is within my own heart. It's not so much externally as I don't want to surrender. And I see things from my own perspective. So Krishna will naturally send situations or arrange situations to give us a chance to get freed from whatever inhibitions we have, whatever fears we have, whatever materialistic concepts we have. Krishna will arrange situations to either frustrate them or force us to surrender, or whatever it may be, to give them up or force us to surrender. No choice, ultimately no choice. So difficulties in preaching in the UK. Well, you know, when I joined, I didn't see any difficulties. To me, it just seemed like it was the only thing that really had any meaning, and there was no difficulty. The greatest difficulty, I would say, would be maybe a little inhibitions on myself, on my part, a little bit, shy, nervous, shy, etc., especially in the face of those who are, which means pretty much everybody, those who are more qualified or more mature than myself. So I had a few inhibitions there, but that quickly diminished by going on Sankirtan. What difficulties did we have? We didn't call them difficulties. They were fun. You know, getting arrested every day was not a difficulty. It was great. We really enjoyed getting arrested every day in a sense because, you know, we just felt we were part of Lord Chaitanya's movement. It wasn't, why is this happening to me? You know, it was great when we had no hot water at all, even in the winter. So it was a Krishna, you know, must be really good for me. It was great when there was only rice and dal for lunch and nothing else every day of the week. And, you know, breakfast was just boiled semolina in water with 8 chickpeas. We never thought it was a difficulty. We never thought there was a difficulty with 10 of us sleeping in the same room, and with a shower and bathroom was in the same room as well. We never thought that was a difficulty. We thought that was actually fun. And Prabhupada wrote us a letter. He said, for you, it is very austere. He said, but for you, it is simply fun. And it was. We were enjoying. It was really. I mean, how can I say? I can't. I mean, perhaps if I dig my mind, I don't know. The real difficulties I started remembrance. All I can say, remembrance. The first difficulty it was also not difficult getting bitten by 10,000 mosquitoes. My first trip to Mayapur, or getting, you know, fevers and having your legs swollen up like a balloon, etc., etc. It didn't seem like a difficulty. It was just somehow or another. It was just part of our, you know, surrender or something. I don't know what, just some special mercy. First difficulty I would say for me was when, you know, material desires started to become too strong, when about 1976-ish or something. I never thought the material desire would ever enter my mind again. I was a bit naive. So that was difficult to deal with that because I didn't expect it. It's when unexpected things come along, you know. But we expected challenge, we expected austerity, we expected this, we expected no one was going to be interested. We expected all that, and we also expected Krishna's mercy, that anything's possible. So I can't remember any specific difficulties, to be honest, in preaching in the early days in UK. I mean, other than our inhibitions and our shortcomings. But externally, I can't remember anything. I mean, you could mention many. We had no money. We had no electricity sometimes. We had no hot water at all. We had no beds, nothing to sleep on. You had to sleep on the floor on a mat, or you had a sleeping bag if you were lucky. But it didn't seem difficult. For most people, it was very austere. We had one toilet in the whole building, men and women. Yeah, it didn't seem difficult. I don't know, going on the street, rain, snow, and wind, 8 hours a day on Harinam, didn't seem difficult. It was great. It was like, what can I say? I don't know. It's just something remarkable, something we wanted, I guess. I mean, Krishna's special mercy, Prabhupada's special mercy. Preaching in France, I could go on all night. Preaching in every country has its different flavors, but in every situation, nothing happens by chance. And the most difficult thing of all is relationships between devotees. When there's, let's say, frictional or misunderstandings based on whatever reason, some self-centered, whatever, motives or whatever it may be, inattention, whatever it may be. But relationships between devotees are probably the most painful or the most difficult thing to accommodate, probably. Whatever form they take, which is of a negative nature, that's probably the most painful thing of all. Being devoid of the association of devotees is another thing, of course, but didn't get that in the beginning. We were very bonding. We were very bonded because there was just a few devotees and the whole world was kind of, basically not necessarily against us, but it was like we were on the path of revolution against what the whole world stood for, basically. So a strong bonding was there because we had a united goal. And when we don't have a united goal, then we get all kinds of problems. When we lose sight of the goal, then you see all the problems around. I'll tell you one thing. One of the things that sticks in my mind, one time, and it would have been about 75, I was down what we call the underground. Sometimes they call it the metro or whatever. Those trains that go under the ground. So in London, they call it the underground. In Paris, they call it the metro, subway in New York, whatever it's called. So I was down there one day, I don't know, going back to the temple or going out, I don't know, but I was down there anyway. And I saw one signboard on the other side of the train line. They put these big placards up there with some advert on it. Usually they're advertising some, film or some product, but this one was not really advertising anything. I don't even know who put it there, why they put it there, but it was very prolific and profound statement which stuck in my mind. And it was a picture of the ocean, and there was offshore, looking from the shore to the horizon, and the sun was rising on the horizon of the ocean, and it was rising in this picture, this photograph. It was obviously a specific photograph someone had taken of the sun rising, and it was rising right in the middle. It's called arch. Sometimes you have these rocks offshore. They're like jagged rocks, especially in England. We have these. I don't know if you have them in Mauritius, but jagged rocks, maybe a kilometer offshore. And sometimes, if they're big ones sticking up, they have like this arch hole. It's like the rocks form like an arch, and the sea is still underneath. So you got this arch, and they put the picture of the sun was rising. It was right in the middle of this arch on the horizon of the ocean, half like this, And there was a slogan on this sign. It said, obstacles. Obstacles are things you see when you lose sight of the goal. And it really went deep into me. If you take your eyes off the sun, what do you see in that picture? You see jagged rocks. You get caught. Now, those rocks were the death knell for sailors in many cases, because when the tide goes out, you can't see them. Oh, tide comes in, you can't see them, and they get shipwrecked many times on these rocks. So it has many different meanings, but as soon as you take the eyes off of the sun, you see all these dangerous rocks, difficulties. Difficulties are things you see when you lose sight of the goal. So the secret is keeping one's consciousness on the goal. pure chanting, the giving and not taking. Always we're thinking of expectations sometimes, but in the mood of service, not in the mood of being served, in the mood of giving, not in the mood of getting, in the mood, in the mood of loving, not in the mood of being loved, etc., like this. This type of mentality and focusing, why are we doing it? Are we doing it because we want to feel good? Are we doing it to get free of karma? Are we doing it because I want to become a gopi? Are we doing it because people respect me for doing it? What is our motive? No, our motive should be, remember Srila Prabhupada, what he did, what he sacrificed, what he taught. Our goal should be to show our indebtedness to Prabhupada. That should be our focus goal. We may not know Krishna, but at least we have some idea of how indebted we are to Prabhupada. That much we can focus. And that will help us not to get caught by the rocks. Keep our focus on the goal. We can never repay that indebtedness, never. At least we can try to work towards. And that will bring unity. Unity. When there's one center point, there is unity. There is no difficulty at all. Even if you're beaten or whipped, even if everything is lost, even if everything burns down, nothing. It's not really a difficulty. And nothing happens without the will of the Lord. The whole purpose of all these things, temples, tilaks, dresses, rules and regulations, call it what you will. The whole point is to surrender to Krishna. That's all. To come to that point. And that no one is to blame. There's nothing to blame. We're going through what we need to go through to have the opportunity to surrender to Krishna. That's all. Nothing's right or wrong in one sense. Of course, we have to use common sense and do the needful. But in practical terms, we have to do that. But in absolute terms, it's a matter of whatever situation we're in. Even if we're a murderer, a drug addict, whatever it is, if we surrender to Krishna, we're achieving the life goal. So Prabhupada taught us that in feeling constant indebtedness to Prabhupada, no matter what situation we're in, whether we're a sannyasi or a grihasta or grihamaiti or whatever we are, just take shelter of that and what I can do to assist Prabhupada, to try to please Prabhupada in some way or another. What can I do? 1% of the world population, the situation will change. And that's a lot of people. You know how many that is? 1% of the world's population. That's a lot of people. There are 8 billion people almost on this planet. So 10% would be 800 million. So you're talking of 80 million people. And that's a lot of people. If they're Krishna conscious, their presence alone will change the whole environment. No, we have another thing here is that sometimes we don't quite, I don't think so anyway, we don't quite catch what it means. It's not that everyone's going to be wearing tilak and chanting 16 rounds a day. Not exactly, nothing's impossible, but that's not necessarily what it means. That everybody is connected to Krishna, that every single person on this planet is on their path back to Godhead. It may not appear. It's like Prabhupada said in San Francisco in 1974 or something like that. At the Rath Yatra, he said, all you boys and girls, and there were 10,000 hippies there who have seen Lord Jagannath on a Rath car today are going back to Godhead in your next lifetime. So, we can only see on the externals. On the internal platform, we don't know what's going on out there. When somebody sees the Harinam party going down the street, they have an impression on their hearts which never goes away. When the time of death comes, that picture of the Harinam party comes up on the screen of their consciousness, and all the rubbish is just wiped out. Prabhupada said that to Giriraj Maharaj in Bombay. Did anyone who sees Jagannath on a Rath car when the time of death comes? Jagannath appears in their consciousness, everything else is wiped out. Just like when you have a negative film, you put it into the sun, all of the picture is wiped out. So he said it's like that. So somehow or other, people get an impression of Krishna consciousness. In itself, that means that the whole world is becoming Krishna conscious. They may not be practically manifesting it, maybe, but they're actually becoming Krishna conscious. Success is there already. Their lives are successful. So the devotee's business is not, it's not our business to analyze, is Krishna this and that, how is he doing it, however that's up to him, between him and the jiva. But our business is to try to become the purer we are, the more that impression will be, let's say, awoken in the hearts of others or impressed upon others. So 80 million devotees, and Prabhupada is talking about here, really devotees, not just, distant devotees. That's also good. But if you had 80 million solid preachers, devotees in this movement, dedicated, pure, you can imagine the effect. One pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada, we can't imitate, but one pure devotee has had such a profound effect on the change of the world. Imagine 80 million. You can't imagine it. You cannot imagine it. But even if that's not the case in terms of numbers of pure devotees, just 80 million devotees who are sympathetic or somewhat involved in Krishna consciousness goes a long way. Everywhere they go has some effect on everyone they meet. And it spreads everywhere, all over the world, to far distant corners. And Prabhupada's books are going in different forms to far distant corners of the world, practically everywhere in every language. So in this way, even if it's not complete in this lifetime, the seeds of devotional service are being planted and cultivated in everyone's heart on this planet, practically speaking, right now. It's amazing. How much more time is needed to achieve this from a practical viewpoint? Well, I'm not one of these, what do you call them? I don't know what you call them in the material world. They have these people who give estimates. It will take so long before, such and such a thing's going to happen. Prabhupada said it can happen in a moment like this. That's not our business to worry too much about that. That's up to Krishna. We just have to try to make sure it happens with us. It's easy to analyze everyone else, or not easy to do that, but we may analyze everyone else around us, but we got to look at ourselves. Am I Krishna conscious? Even if everyone else isn't, we got to look at ourselves, try to see at least this one. I can't do anything about others. I can only try to encourage them, but I can't make anything happen with them. That's up to them. But at least we can sincerely try by prayer and endeavor to change our own consciousness. So maybe we'll become one of those 18 million instruments. That means not that they're individual gods, they're all instruments of the one Krishna. Acting as a guru is only one guru, and he acts through those who are instrumental, those who are surrendered instruments in his hands to spread Krishna consciousness. To become one of them. And the more people become one of them, the quicker it'll happen. But it's not going to happen by any amount of institutional adjustments, I can assure you that. And that won't do anything except for, keep the same things going on. Moving the problem from this shoulder to that problem doesn't solve doesn't solve the situation. So the real thing is when we become Krishna conscious, institutional things are already there to facilitate the progress of Krishna consciousness. Initiation, of course, is much deeper than that, but if we only take it as an institutional external feature, no, it's not that much use either. At least it can take a long time before anything fructifies in the form of fruits. So, it's like, how long does it take for a tree to give fruit? So that depends on the weather. It depends on how you look after the tree. It depends on the health of the tree. It depends on what other people do around it. It depends on which bugs come and eat all the blossoms. There are many factors which are involved. You can't absolutely say. You can only say, if you do this, it normally takes 5 years. So if we surrender, it normally takes a split second. But we know it's not taking a split. I guess if it ever happens, it will take a split second in that moment, but it's a gradual process of surrender usually. So let's see. But the seeds can be planted and have been planted in countless millions, if not billions of people's hearts already. It's going on already. Look at the positive side. Billions of people have seen and heard the Mahamantra. Billions. And about 600 million books have been distributed, hundreds of millions of plates of prasadam, maybe billions, I don't know. So everyone who's taken prasadam is on their way back to Godhead. Everyone has seen a book, everyone has taken a book, everyone has seen the Harinam party. everyone, on some point or another, at some level or another, are on their way back to God, even animals. So what to speak of humans? So don't be too kind of externally measuring these things and expecting it to be like, now 1% out, 80 million people wearing tilak, chanting 16 rounds, wearing saris and dhotis or whatever you're supposed to do when you're initiated, and following all the regulated principles. Maybe that's not the only thing that counts. Those are all supports. Is that somewhere in people's hearts, affection towards Krishna is being awoken. Hare Krishna. Yes, become very instrumental. I pray that you will be in distributing the Maha Mantra and prasadam to everyone, and Prabhupada's books. And one of the best ways to do that is ourselves to make sure that we only take prasadam. We don't eat anything except for prasadam, and do it as nicely as you can, and read Prabhupada's books as well as distribute. That's how you can associate with Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, you can know me through my books. I put all my ecstasies into my books. He's present there in his books. This is how we can experience his association, by attentively hearing his words. Hare Krishna. Well, I guess our time has zoomed way past our schedule.
Wow.
And some of you have things to do, not like me, lazy people. We just sit around eating prasadam and talking about things. You have things to do, important things to do, I'm sure, some of you. Hare Krishna. Okay, well, we're cut off there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So thank you for these very inspiring words. Actually, indeed, I'm really touched, and I'm really enthused also the way Maharaj spoke. Like, we have to do the needful, and how to do the needful is by developing a strong bond with united goals. So thank you, Maharaj, for these precious instructions. And we thank you a lot for sparing some time and giving us your association here. And also,
you're always welcome to come to New Mayapur and get more.
Jai. And also, Maharaj, we would
plenty of service here. If you like gardening, or if you like building, or if you like whatever, cooking, cleaning, deity worship. Everything is there. You speak French, so you'll be well at home here.
Jai, that's wonderful, Maharaj. So the message is passed, and Maharaj also, I would take some of your time. Actually, I first had your darshan and an association in 2013 in Vrindavan, and I was just amazed. I just read in the books like this, the pure devotees, they don't walk, they dance, they don't talk, they sing. But then I saw you in Loi Bazaar, and I saw that bizarre.
Oh, yeah, that's where I usually spend my time in Vrindavan. I just sit around there drinking juices and talking with the wallahs down there, and shopping and looking for nice things to buy.
And for me, it was bizarre to see you like dancing there.
Bizarre in the bazaar.
Yes. So I'm really honored, Maharaj, more than honored actually, to be in your association, and I would really love to have more of your association. And we are inviting you. Soon we'll be like in 30 seconds we'll show you our new temple. But before that, my gratitude goes to His Grace Ramai Prabhu and Vrinda Mataji for being so kind to arrange this meeting, and also very heartfelt thanks to Rasikananda Prabhu.
Oh, that looks beautiful. Where is this? In Port Louis or where?
No, it's in Phoenix Temple, Maharaj. This will be our new temple, the Temple of Unity, Sri Radha Golokananda Mandir.
Unity.
Yes.
That's nice.
So this is the final project, Maharaj, and we'll show you where we are up to now. Next.
That's not the temple. That's just an artist impression, is it?
Yes, that's the final result, and we are right now. We've reached like 50% of the construction. We are working hard on that, Maharaj, to get it done within like 2 years. Thus, we are inviting Maharaj and inviting all the devotees to please come, because we speak French here. Hare Krishna. Words, Maharaj, I would introduce our next speaker. So this Saturday, we will receive now His Grace. I'm sorry, Sridhar Prabhu. Sridhar Prabhu, he's from Mauritius, but he's been for years in South Africa. And Srila Prabhu, he'll be speaking about now the white elephants are here. And then what we need grounds. So Srila Prabhu will bring the white elephants in chapter 5, entitled A Lot of Ground to be Covered. And we are inviting all of you to please join this humble offering to Srila Prabhupada 125th anniversary celebration. With these few words, I would request everyone to please unmute yourself and put on your camera so that we can everyone chant a very loud Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and Vaishnava obeisances to all the Vaishnava and Vaishnavis here. So Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Oh, such a lovely family. Anita, Kalpa, Karu, Neskam,
Hare Hare.
Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Oh, Premanande,
Hari Hari Bo.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the devotees. If there's anyone still.
Maharaj ki jai. Thank you.
I am begging you with all my teeth. Please chant Hare Krishna, Prabhupada. Please chant. This will change the world the more the chanting goes on. Yuga Dharma, Harinam, Sankirtanam. Will we say good night to everyone if that's okay? Can I leave?
Yes, Maharaj.
Sure.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Good night.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
American devotees. Good afternoon or good evening to the European devotees, the English devotees, and good whatever it is. Just be good. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna devotees. I'll see you for next class with a new speaker. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
We're having a Kirtan Mela next week in New Mayapur. Sachinanda Maharaj is coming. Kadamba Kana Maharaj is coming. And already Agni Dev Prabhu is here. So we're having a Kirtan Mela here at New Mayapur. You're welcome to come. 9, 10, and 11 of July.
Wow.
Bring a tent.
Hare Krishna. It was a love. Excellent. Thank you. Ramai Prabhu, thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Guru.